Let's go ahead and apply our previous discussions to build a custom action result using Visual Studio. Now, in the last lesson, we discussed the JSON action result type that MVC provides for us. I really like the JSON result, but it does have some limitations. JSON result uses the .NET JavaScript serializer class, which usually does a good job, but it doesn't have quite as many features as you might like. If I know I'm going to be working with a lot of JSON in an MVC project, I prefer to use an open source tool called JSON.NET. JSON.NET provides more robust options and features. Over in my browser, I have a page open from the JSON.NET documentation. There are a ton of features listed here, and it compares the capabilities of a couple other JSON tools. The built-in JavaScript serializer is on the right, while JSON.NET is on the left. If I scroll through here, you can see how many more features are checked and supported with JSON.NET. It would be nice if the JSON action result used this instead. Well, with only a small bit of work, we can make this happen. Back inside Visual Studio, let's get started on that. If we look in our references, JSON.NET is actually already included in recent versions of the MVC templates, so we don't need to add it. If you don't see it, just go ahead and add it from NuGet. One other thing I have done is created a class called person in our models folder, just in the interest of time. This is a simple class with a few properties that we'll use for serialization, and you can modify it as you'd like. So first off, let's add a new folder to our project. I'll right-click on the top and just select to add a new folder. Go ahead and name that extensions, and then we can confirm that. So now let's right-click on our new folder and choose to add a new class. In the dialog window, let's name that JSON.NET result. This way we keep a familiar naming pattern, but it's also easy to understand that it's using JSON.NET. Just hit OK and that class will be created for us. The first thing we need to do in this class is make sure that it inherits from action result. So let's just include that after our class name. Next, we need a public property for the object that will be passed in for serialization. Let's just type out public object data and then add in auto-implemented properties. We're defining the type as object because we don't know what will be passed in. JSON.NET is smart enough to handle this scenario. Now we need to override the very important execute result method of the parent action result class. If we just start typing public override execute result, Visual Studio will prompt us for the rest, and if we hit enter, it will add that in. Inside this method, we're going to be working with the response object, so let's grab that from the context object that's passed in and assign it to a variable. So we can call that var response and then give it a value of context.http_context.response. Below that, we also want to set the content type of the response to application/JSON. This will provide more information to the browser or whatever receives the request for how to handle it. The final line we want to add in this method is the most important. Let's type response.write and pass in JSON convert.serializeObject, and then into that we can pass in our data object. JSON convert is a useful class provided by JSON.NET that can help with serialization and other tasks. And with that in place, that's really all we have to do in this class. In a production version, you would probably want to add in some null checks and additional metadata like the MVC JSON result does, but for now this is fine. Now let's jump over to our controller and start to implement this class. Let's change our index method so that it returns some JSON. Right now, if we want to use our JSON.NET result, I have to replace this return line with something like return new JSON.NET result and assign our object to the data property manually. I don't want to do that. I want a helper method that allows me to use the type of syntax that the native JSON result does. So below our action methods, I'm just going to paste in a small helper method. This method is called JSON.NET, and it allows us to just pass in our data object, and it will take care of creating an instance and returning the action result. This will give us our friendly syntax inside of our action methods. In a production application, you would probably want to add this on a separate class that inherits from the MVC controller class. Your home controller could then inherit from that new custom class and have this method available. That way it could be reused across all your application's controllers. We only have one controller, so this is fine for now. Inside our index method, let's create a new instance of our person object. We can just give them a first name of something like Bob, a last name of John, and then give them an age as well. Now all we have to do is type return JSON net and pass in our person object. Notice how we're using this friendly syntax thanks to our helper method. So that's really all there is to it. Let's run our application and see what happens. Right away, you can see we get a JSON string of our person object. I've opened this up in Chrome because Chrome will display it right on the page. Other browsers might prompt you for a download. All things considered, it took very little work to get this far, and you could easily improve this on your own. The sample object we used would have worked fine with the built-in JSON result, but now we have more features at our disposal when we need them. Action results can be a powerful way to interact with the lifecycle, so keep an open mind about opportunities to work with them.